Aren't they wonderful? The Story Share Band. Welcome to beautiful Orvis Auditorium here on the campus of the University of Hawaiʻi Mānoa. My name's Tim Slaughter. I'd like to welcome you to another in the SCEP Live Online concert series. SCEP Live Online is a production of the University of Hawaiʻi Presents, based at the University of Hawaiʻi Mānoa Outreach College. It's a co-production of the University of Hawaiʻi Music Department and the East-West Center Arts Program. Support and funding is provided by the Hawaii State Foundation on Culture and the Arts, the National Endowment for the Arts, the University of Hawaii, Kaunoa Senior Services, and Friends of Manoa Library. Tonight's a special program for you. We call it SCEP Live Online Story Share. We're going to be hearing stories from individuals in the community that had some experience with the university. And to get us started is our MC for the evening, Ben Moffitt. Ben came to Hawaii in 1983, expecting to stay for just 3 years and then move on. Well, he's been here ever since. He has performed throughout Hawaii, across the mainland, and internationally. He co-founded Monkey Waterfall, a dance theater company with Yuki Shiroma. He taught at Windward Community College for 22 years, and his most recent work is Imperfect Gentleman, a one-man show about gender and family dynamics. Now I'd like to turn it over to Ben. Welcome to SCEP Live Online Story Share, Ben.
Mahalo, Tim. And mahalo to the Story Share Band. Bailey Matsuda on piano, Chris Ye on saxophones, and Dr. Alex Morrison on upright bass. And aloha mai kako. Tonight you're going to get different perspectives on the University of Hawaii at Mānoa. You're going to hear from former students, former teachers. Some of the stories are heartwarming. Others are insightful. Some are funny. And some are gently critical. You're going to hear about protests, workarounds and super workarounds, and lives profoundly impacted by this amazing institution. Let me start it off with some reminiscences about my life as a graduate student here at Mānoa. I attended 1983 to 1986, studying Asian theater and directing. Seems like last week to me, but it was last century. Like another world, another culture. Life on campus has changed quite significantly. Now, I don't mean to underestimate the students of today, but in our day, it was very easy for us, exceedingly easy for us, to make mischief. For one thing, we could drink alcohol on campus. We regularly had cast parties in the lab theater with no faculty or staff present. Obviously, they trusted us, and we made it a point to clean up after ourselves. I was a graduate assistant helping to produce the Asian Theater Journal, and the powers in charge felt that it was important for me to have a key that could open the copy room, the mail room, the outside doors if I was working late, and the office of my supervisor, Professor James Brandon. But I soon discovered that this little key had enormous power, magical powers. It could open every single door in Kennedy Theater. If I needed a tool, I could get into the scene shop. If I needed a prop or a costume, I could get into the costume shop. I could get into every single faculty member's office. I was in my 20s. Think of the power, the responsibility, the temptation. More about that later. Now, my friends and I like to play pranks on each other, practical jokes. We would sometimes even try to make each other laugh on stage. Highly unprofessional behavior, I must admit. I remember one time, my friend Kyle was on stage in front of 500 people. I was in the wings, but he could clearly see me. So I beckoned to him very mildly. At the time, I was wearing a woman's corset and a chicken mask. I succeeded marvelously in making him laugh on stage. Now, our first teller this evening will be Dave Del Rocco. Dave was born and raised in New Jersey, but after living here for 40 years, he calls Hawaii home. In 1988, he left a good job as a flight attendant to go back to school for a master's degree in library and information sciences. And even though he already had a bachelor's degree in Spanish from Rutgers University, he had a strong desire to learn the Hawaiian language. The result was a long career as a librarian in the Hawaii Public Library System, and then for the past 13 years, serving as a teacher at Punahou School. Along the way, he became fluent in Hawaiian and an excellent storyteller. Here now is Dave Del Rocco.
Aloha kako. I'm Dave Del Rocco, and I'm a teacher at Punahou School, and I'm very honored to be here as part of this program tonight to share my stories about going to the University of Hawaiʻi at Mānoa and what it meant for me. And I want to take you back so I can set the scene for my story. And I was a very nerdy little kid growing up in a small town in central New Jersey. And I had not very much traveled much at all. I had never been west of eastern Pennsylvania. And so the whole world, most of the US, was very foreign to me. And as I was growing up, I was one of those kids that loved to look at maps and globes and just fantasize about what the world would be like. So my mom even likes to tell a story that when I was about 7 and I was in my room and it was very quiet, she thought I was up to no good. And she said, "Honey, what are you doing?" And I said, "Oh, I'm studying Swahili, Mommy." And I was, because I was a nerd. That's the kind of kid I was. I had found a pamphlet that taught you Swahili. It wasn't useful in central New Jersey, but there you go. Anyway, so that's the kind of kid I was. And I went to Rutgers University, which was our state university in New Jersey. I wanted to say in-state. And I decided when I was graduating that I was going to become a flight attendant. It was the only job I wanted because I wanted to see the world. So I ignored the advice of my wise college counselor who said a language major should always go into business, which was not for me. So I applied to several airlines, and I got my first choice, which was Pan Am. If you are over a certain age, you might remember them. Like the bumper stickers say, they're gone, but not forgotten. They actually went out of business about 30 years ago. But what was fascinating to me was that our training center was in Honolulu. So for somebody from the East Coast who had never been west of Pennsylvania, coming out here for training was amazing. I got based in Miami first, and then I transferred to the Kennedy Airport to fly out of New York and live in New Jersey again because I was homesick for my family. But then the lure of the islands got to me. And so in 1981, in June, so nearly 40 years ago, I packed up my bags. I transferred to the Honolulu base. I told my family, I'll probably stay there for a year or 2 years, and never came back. I'm still here because I fell in love with Hawaii for so many reasons. And part of it, of course, was the culture and the people and the climate, but the language as well. And after I'd been here for a few years, I joined a halau. I started dancing hula, and it was fascinating, but I felt frustrated that I didn't know the language because if you don't know what you're dancing about, you're missing part of the experience. So I decided I would have to eventually take the language. And what happened with Pan Am was after 7 years of flying with them, they sold out the Honolulu base to another carrier, and it was not a happy experience. So after 2 more years of flying with them, I decided I'm going to change my life. I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to get a master's degree in library and information studies, and I'm also going to take Hawaiian language. So my idea at that time was I'll put these two things together and become some heavy-duty researcher, maybe work at the Bishop Museum and, do old-style Hawaiian research. The reality was that I became a children's librarian in the public library system and loved it. But I kept going back to school at UH because I loved the Hawaiian language and I kept taking more classes. But working full time, I could only do one at a time and usually like evening classes or whenever I could fit it in my schedule. So it took a very long time to finish the degree. But the story that I thought about when I was thinking about sharing stories from UH was my very first day, way back in the summer of 1988. So I had just quit flying. All my friends thought I was crazy to give up a job with great benefits. And I only had a part time job now as a delivery driver to put me through graduate school. And the library school was scheduled to start in the fall. And in the summer before that, I was going to take Hawaiian 101. I was so excited. And imagine how I felt when I got to the door that very first day. And there was a note on the door saying the class has been canceled. And not just for the day, but for the whole summer due to low enrollment. Now, people who know me know that I'm not really a troublemaker, but this was a big deal to me. And I thought there must be a way to get this class reinstated. So I found out who the summer dean was, and I went to his office and I said to him, I can see from the catalog that there are many sections of Chinese 101, Japanese 101, Korean 101. There is only one section of Hawaiian 101, and you guys have canceled it. And this is Hawaii, and where else can we learn that language? So he was very reasonable. It didn't take long to convince him that, yeah, this does need to be reinstated. And in those days, this was 1988, right? There was no email. So they contacted us through phone calls. And about a week later, we all gathered to class. And on the first day, the teacher came in and she told us she was real happy that we were there because we all thought it was going to be canceled. So she said, yeah, some haole guy camped out at the dean's office. And so I raised my hand. I said, oh, yeah, that was me. I didn't camp out, actually. I was there for maybe 10 minutes. But he was very agreeable to this, and he reinstated the class. And we ended up with 13 students. So it wasn't super small. But that one thing changed my life completely because I eventually did go to library school in the fall and became a librarian. But I made lifelong friendships through both Hawaiian language as well as the library world, and kept going back. And then eventually in 2006, I was able to finish my degree in Hawaiian language. I do have a short story about that, though. When I made the decision to apply for that degree, which would have been, a bachelor's in Hawaiian language, I went to the student center and I explained what I was planning to do. And the lady who I was talking to was very officious and very stern. And she said, no, you can't do that. And I said, well, all I want to do is get a bachelor's in Hawaiian. And she said, no, you can't go backwards. And I said, what do you mean? What does going backwards mean? And she said, you have a master's degree from this university. You can't get a bachelor's now. That's going backwards. So I thought about it and I said, well, it's in two different fields and I'm trying to change careers. So she was not having it. So I thought, once again, I'm going to have to go above to the person in charge. And I found her boss. And again, somebody reasonable who said, yeah, of course you can do that. Where else are you going to get a degree in Hawaiian? So that's what happened to allow me to get that degree. Like I said, I got it in 2006. And what happened because of that was a lot of things, besides all the friendships that I made and all the experiences, and just even things that life became richer in Hawaii. Just silly things like knowing what the street names mean, or again, with hula, knowing what the songs are about. But the other thing that happened was I was able to teach Hawaiian in 3 different venues, very different venues. For 5 years, I taught in a private home in Kalihi to several friends. And it was friends, but we treated it like a real class, and it did go on for 5 years. And there was homework and everything. Then for 6 months, I was able to teach Hawaiian on base at Pearl Harbor to military and their dependents, and that was done through Hawaii Pacific University. And then I got hired at Punahou, and I got hired as a librarian and a teacher, but not a language teacher. I was told I would be teaching Hawaiian culture, and I would be half-time Hawaii reference librarian. At the time, they were looking for a librarian who could speak Hawaiian, and there aren't very many of us, apparently. I might have been the only one who applied for the job, but I did get it, and it was great having that experience of working as both a librarian and a teacher. And at one point, many years ago, I was able to teach Hawaiian language classes at Punahou for a year when the person who was the main Hawaiian language teacher went on sabbatical for a year. You'll meet her later tonight. And thanks to that experience, I got to teach Hawaiian language at a high school level as well. So I guess the whole gist of this, and I tell my students this, is that you have to be really open-minded because, you know, one decision can really change your life. And my decision to not just come to Hawaii, but to learn the language, to get a degree in it, and to really pursue it has really changed my life and has really enriched it. I've been able to translate books for the Department of Education for their immersion schools. And I've done storytelling in both Hawaiian and in English. And one of my favorite experiences was on the island of Kauai, where I got to tell Hawaiian stories in Hawaiian to a small group of people from Ni'ihau who live over on Kauai and who speak their very own charming version of Hawaiian. But those are my stories, thanks to the University of Hawaii. Thank you very much for listening to me. And I hope you have a pleasant evening and enjoy the rest of the show. Thank you. Aloha.
Next up, we have Neil Milner. Neil was a professor at the university in political science for over 40 years. Currently, he's a columnist for Civil Beat, a contributing editor to Hawaii Public Radio's program The Conversation, as well as a political analyst for the local TV station KITV. And in his spare time, he writes books, plays, acts, tells stories. He's the author of the book, The Gift of Underpants. What a great title. Neil Milner.
The Shapiro strategy. You work at the same place for over 40 years, as I did at the University of Hawaii, and you expect to have experienced lots of memorable events, many highs, lots of lows, life as a highlight reel. But not me. For me, looking at my time at Hawaii is like looking at a medieval tapestry from the opposite side of the museum. It's a wide-angle blur with a few barely visible gold threads, but nothing glittering. In fact, my one glittering UH moment wouldn't even be on this tapestry because it happened before I got here and it ended the night we arrived in August 1972, 8 hours late at the old Honolulu International Airport, the one with free pineapple juice and stairs instead of jetways. In late 1971, we were living near Berkeley, California. I had a one-year fellowship at Cal on leave from my job as a professor at Grinnell College in Iowa. That Iowa job was terrific. But after 4 years, my wife and I were getting restless. We couldn't see ourselves spending the rest of our lives in a small Iowa town. Restless, but not desperate. It was a good job, and it was a pretty nice little town. Still, I decided to put myself on the market and see what was out there. Had a couple of job interviews, nothing exciting. But we were okay. We were having fun. I wasn't working nearly as hard on my book as I was supposed to be. We were experiencing San Francisco and living in a place, a beautiful place, where flowers bloomed in February. Then out of the blue, out of nowhere, I get some letter from some guy at the University of Hawaiʻi in the political science department. The letter said, "We have a job available in your field. Would you be willing to be considered one of the applicants?" What the hell? No commitment, no sweat. I didn't think of it as a dream job because I'd never had any dreams about the political science department at the University of Hawaiʻi. I knew nothing about the political science department, and at the time, almost nothing about Hawaii. And besides that letter, big deal. The letter reminded me of those ads you get in the mail that have one person's name on it and then, or present occupant. Because in academic life, the real deal, when jobs get serious, the search for jobs gets serious, is when you're actually invited out for a job interview. A job interview for a professor is as much a rite of passage as boot camp is for a kid who joins the Marines. It's long, it's tedious, it's very thorough, and it can last at least 2 days. No one gets an academic job without an interview. So I figured, sure, keep my name in there, and then I sort of forgot about the letter. A little while later, I get another letter, and it says, "Are you still interested?" I figure, sure, why not? But I still see myself as a present occupant. Then we heard nothing. On a late night in April 1972, almost exactly 49 years to the day, we were in the middle of a Passover Seder at my friend's house in San Francisco. The host got up to answer the phone. "It's your babysitter," she said. You know that feeling of dread. Nothing good comes from a babysitter call. I nervously picked up the phone. It wasn't dread. Instead, she said, "Somebody just called you from Hawaii and wants to get in touch with you right away. Can I give him this phone number?" A few minutes later, he called. "Hi," he said. "This is Mike Shapiro from the political science department, and we'd like to offer you the job." What? What are you talking about? I calmed myself and I said, well, thanks, but aren't you going to have me out for an interview? No, he said, we don't have the money. But tell you what, he said, I'm coming to Berkeley in a couple of weeks to do some research. Take the job, and then I'll interview you afterwards when I get to Berkeley. So you're going to interview me after I take the job? Sure, he said, like, no problem. Why are you even asking? The Shapiro strategy. Well, my wife and I decided to take the Hawaii job about the same way we decided to have kids. Couldn't think of any reason why not. How bad can it be? We can always leave if we don't like it. Young, confident, and ignorant. Shapiro and I had that interview at a Euclid Avenue coffee shop near the north end of the Berkeley campus. We goofed off and laughed for 3 hours. There was no serious political science discussion. It was much more Animal House than White House. So we moved to Hawaii in August 1972. So the primary story of my career here, the one that framed the way I thought about this university, even happened before I directly experienced any of the highs and lows of being a part of this place and working in a place that was so vital, so important, and so truly zany as the University of Hawaii. I came to learn, and it didn't take me very long, that my oddly illogical, after-the-fact job interview was not some odd exception. The Shapiro strategy is University of Hawaii standard operating procedure. It was when I got here, it continued all the time that I worked here, and it no doubt is like that today. Listen, the University of Hawaii is many things, but at its heart, it's a commuter university. It's got a puny endowment. The legislators don't trust us. It never has enough money, and the rules and procedures can drive students and faculty nuts. This place survives. No, it thrives on the basis of workarounds and super workarounds. A workaround is something that's temporary. A super workaround is something that is permanent that was only supposed to be temporary. While I was at UH, some scientists climbed the roof of their building to fix their lab. Secretaries worked to squeeze out more money than they could for supplies. A UH president said that faculty members should bring their own replacement projector bulbs. And some other guys in one of the other science buildings dug their own trench in order to get going a repair that was taking way too long to get started. Not enough money for a brand new academic program. What can we do to make it happen anyway? A commuter campus where there's not nearly enough parking for student commuters. Get up at 5 a.m., park a half mile from campus, and sleep in your car with your girlfriend resting on your shoulder until it's time to go to class. An excellent student of mine in an honors class was paying her own way through college. She danced at Rocco, slept in her car for a few hours, and then came to my early morning class with glitter still on her lashes. Working all this time under the Shapiro strategy, sometimes, oh man, lots of days, it made me crazy. But overall, it made me proud. Proud to be a part of this place. Because, as the Rolling Stones say, sometimes you can't get what you want, so work, keep trying to get what you can, to get what you need. And the University of Hawaii community tries and tries and tries some more. And looking back, I also feel very lucky because if there was no Shapiro strategy, if I had had a real job interview, all White House and no Animal House, I might have screwed it up. Then where would I be?
And now we have Ike Kahaleahu. She's the firstborn of a firstborn of a firstborn, and was born on the windward coast of Oahu in God's country. Waimanalo, of course. With the Ko'olau Mountains as her backyard and the ocean as her front yard, Ike's innate love for adventure, treasure hunting, and the outdoors grew naturally. Tutu Waihine supported her eldest grandchild's passion for life, beauty, and culture, and inspired her to pursue hula, lomi lomi, la'au lapa'au, and other native Hawaiian traditions. With lots of firm encouragement and an aloha, the knowledge passed on turned into a professional career as a cultural practitioner, including a 10-year-long teaching position as the kumu for the Hawaiian Culture and Hula elective class provided by our very own Outreach College here on the Mānoa campus. Today, Kumu Ike resides in Honolulu, where she gladly continues to share what she knows with others. Here is Ike.
Mahalo. Aloha kako. My name is Ike, as you all know now. I am thrilled to be here today to share my experience of just how I became a kumuhula on the campus of University of Hawaiʻi Mānoa, where I did in fact teach for 10 years. My story begins with a very dear teacher of mine and many, Kumule, my favorite kumuhula, my punahele. She was born on the island of Oahu in 1942. Unfortunately, during this time, there was an unjust kapu being widely enforced. It was illegal to practice the Hawaiian culture, especially to read or write in Olelo, Hawaii. Because of this, it was sometimes difficult for practitioners to study their native traditions. I heard my kupuna once say, when you take away a people's language and you take away their aina, they have nothing left but what you give them to fill the void. I feel that anyone who practices the culture in a pono way should be revered as a kahu or treasure keeper. My kumu also expressed to me on many occasions just how vital it is to practice our native traditions if we want to keep the rainbow of diversity and history strong and vibrant in this world. She would say, we cannot afford to be prejudiced. There are not enough Native Hawaiians in the world to keep our culture alive. So who are we to judge those who want to perpetuate it in a dignified way and with aloha? At 9 years old or so, my tutu was taken to a backyard party and by her father. And there was live music and hula. She said she fell in love with hula at first sight. She told me that she knew in that moment she wanted to be a hula dancer. By age 14, she was teaching the neighborhood kids everything she knew, everything she could pick up by watching live performances and studying the lineage and the signature movements of her favorite kumuhula. I am sure she faced many challenges on her way to becoming a kumuhula, but she never complained. She was always too busy dancing. Determined and a little kolohe, she accepted the terms of her chosen path with a smile and a never-give-up spirit. Holomua, she would say, and keep moving forward. She did. In the early 1970s, she started her first hula school in Torrance, California, while she was starting a new family of her own. She was also one of the faces of Hawaiian Airlines, one of the first entertainers hired by Tihati, and a casting crew member and extra on the original Hawaii 5-0. But let me tell you, she was not your typical hapa haole hula girl in a hot pink cellophane skirt and a coconut bra. No, siree. This woman was taken hostage by hula. She would call me to tell me of hula dreams that would stir her in her slumber, compel her to dance out of bed, and she wouldn't be able to fall back asleep until she choreographed what she saw in her dream. Her calls would sound something like, Ike, I need to practice this song that we're working on, I just got another verse. It came to me in a dream last night. Or, aloha, I dreamt of another change I need to make to that song. You know the one. When can you come over? I would just laugh. I was so taken back by her drive for hula and taken back by how involved she was. Hula chose her. I feel, just thinking about it. She was such a natural researcher and such a natural dreamer. I feel that she was such a great teacher because she was always willing to share what she learned. I cannot pinpoint when she first started teaching the Hawaiian culture and hula class at the UH of Hawaiʻi at Manoa. But I do know that she created her own curriculum. Yes, Kalamai. One day she called me to ask me if I would like to come and check out her class. And being her alakai and her right-hand hula dancer, her biggest fan, I gladly accepted her invitation. And in a very old school fashion of watch, don't talk, I silently took notes as Kumu taught her class. I was enthralled. She started by introducing herself with a very resounding aloha. And she explained that Kumu meant teacher or source. She went to each student and asked them their names while she greeted them with a big hug and a honi. She taught them an ipuheke beat while she chanted. She even passed around Hawaiian implements that she gave a brief background on. They were able to experience the sounds of Hawaii hands-on. And she made sure that everybody learned the hula. She did all of this in 50 minutes. I was so excited to go over my notes with her. We would talk hula many nights after a hula show or a class. It was something we enjoyed quite a bit. She started to call me to ask me if I would like to teach certain portions of the lesson. When I showed my interest, and like any loyal alakai, I responded, sure, what time? She called me and she would say, Ike, I have a class this week. Would you be willing to teach the hand motions? And the following week, she would ask me if I would teach the footwork, until she was asking me to teach the hand motions and the footwork. And eventually, she calls me to ask me if I would go ahead and teach the class by myself while she watched this time. I was a bit nervous, as I am a bit now. And I still, went forward. I had her routine pretty much down at this time, so I took on the challenge. She was paying me for this too, mind you. Now, she can whip anyone into shape with rigorous hula drills and a mean ipuheke beat, but she was no slave driver. She was a savvy businesswoman who paid well. Eventually, she started to ask me to fill in for her at UH. And this would happen on a regular. The calls continued. One day, she calls me per usual, except this time she tells me that she has some very important news to tell me. She tells me she's moving to Molokai. I was speechless. Little did I know, Kumu Le, better known to me as my tutu, was preparing me to take over her position at UH all along. She has been preparing me since I was a child. She said that she recognized the hula dancer in me the first time she caught me prancing around on my tippy toes. My greatest advocate, mentor, and role model, my tutu, got my foot in the door, handed me her torch, and lit my path to success. She helped this humble little hula girl with no pala, mind you, to becoming a professional kumu hula at the campus of UH Mānoa. It turned out to be one of the best jobs I ever had, the best job I've ever had, and some of the most cherished memories I have shared with my tutu. I hope that my story helps all of you to keep moving forward no matter what, or as my tutu would say, hola mua, mahalo nui.
Coming up next is Michael Jones. He was a researcher at the University of Hawaiʻi at Mānoa, working with experimental particle physics from 1976 until he retired in 2015. His work included experiments with neutrino bubble chambers and the D0 experiment at Fermilab and the Bell experiment in Japan. Additional projects included work on issues where science and technology have a substantial impact on society, things like nuclear war and missile defense. In 1995, he wrote the script for and helped plan the exhibit, 50 Years with the Bomb. In addition to research, Michael taught a variety of courses, including Physics 100 and Perspectives on Nuclear War. Here to tell you more about his teaching experience is Michael Jones.
Thank you. I got interested in physics in high school in Illinois, got my PhD from the University of Chicago in 1974, and had a postdoctoral job at Rutgers University until 1976, when I moved to UH. I did research in experimental particle physics until I retired in 2015. I had primarily a research position at UH, and had the opportunity to teach some physics courses. I helped develop an interdisciplinary course, Perspectives on Nuclear War, in the 1980s, but also taught an introductory course, Physics 100, which had two noteworthy students. The first story is based upon an email exchange with a student in Physics 100, a one-semester course covering physics from Galileo to the present. It stresses concepts and uses as little math as possible. I chose the course title, Physics for Citizens, because citizens in a technological society need to understand how physics concepts are relevant in issues such as climate change and nuclear weapons. There were typically about 100 students ranging from freshmen to seniors. I taught this class from 2007 to 2011 in the Physical Sciences Auditorium. Like many teachers of large introductory courses, I encountered a few students each semester who seemed unwilling or unable to engage with the course. Some had jobs or small children occupying their time. I gave midterm exams at the 6th and 11th weeks of the semester. One student got my attention in fall 2010 by getting the highest score on midterm 2 after getting one of the lowest scores on midterm 1. Even more memorable was the explanation. Here is my email to the student, November 9th. You got the highest score on midterm 2, which is a dramatic improvement from midterm 1. For my own curiosity, and because it might help other students, I would be interested to know what you did differently in preparing for midterm 2. The student replied the same day. Hi, Professor Jones. Yeah, no problem. Well, to start off, for my first exam that I failed, I didn't anything at all, and hardly even any of the homework. And I never looked over your daily questions. I didn't even purchase the book. Then when I realized I needed to pass my next exam, I bought the book, read every single chapter, went over all the vocabulary words, looked over the concepts, and I looked at all the homework answers you put on the wall as well. But I felt more confident in the short answers because I actually read and reread before the exam. And for the calculations part, I asked one of my friends to tutor me because I had no idea who the actual physics tutors are. But yeah, I realized I really cannot slack in this class and have to read. The student spelling of have was H-A-A-V-V-E-E. Conclusion. I found the student's response memorable partly because of his honest admission of responsibility for poor performance on midterm 1. It is shocking to realize that students could imagine so little effort was required. What makes this student even more unusual was the dramatic improvement after engaging with the course. What can teachers of introductory courses do to engage students who aren't interested in the subject or cannot make the effort to engage with the course? I tried several approaches. For example, videos, news items about physics, contemporary issues involving physics, in-class demonstrations with mixed results. What else could I have done? At the beginning of the next semester, I read the student's email in class. The last time I taught Physics 100 in the spring of 2011, I encountered an even more remarkable student. His name was Chance. He was not a UH student, but had sat in on an astronomy course the previous semester, and, according to his teacher, had done well. This is noteworthy because his usual class was second grade. He was 8 years old. Chance's mother had contacted me before the semester and asked whether Chance could sit in on Physics 100. She said he was interested in physics and astronomy. He would read newspaper articles and ask questions that neither his mother nor his second grade teacher could answer. I was intrigued, but told her I was worried that he would be overwhelmed or bored, and I didn't want to be responsible for discouraging him. I suggested that she get the textbook to see if he could read and understand it. She agreed and assured me that he would be okay. She arranged with his elementary school to pick him up and bring him to UH Mānoa for the class, and then return him. Chance didn't do the weekly homework assignments, so I wasn't sure how well he understood the material initially. However, when I did an in-class demonstration, he would usually ask me about it after class. He was usually the only student who did. In one class, I did the classic demonstration of pulling a tablecloth without moving the dishes on top of it. I told him that magicians often did this. His response was, "But it's science, not magic." After a few classes, some students were curious about him and talked to him. They were especially interested after he took the midterm exams. His score on midterm 2 was above the class average. For the final exam, Chance finished in about 30 minutes. As he walked up to turn in his exam, another student muttered audibly, "I don't believe this." His score on the final was also above the class average. I allowed students to use one page of notes for the exams because I hoped making the page would be a learning experience and would help those who panic during exams. Chance didn't do this. He thought it would be cheating. I had a memorable conversation with Chance during the study period before the final exam. His mother had brought him to UH even though there were no regular classes during the study period. I happened to look out my window and saw him swinging from a tree branch. I called his mother and went to talk to him until she came. I asked him what was his favorite part of the course. He said it was the last chapter of the textbook on particle physics. I had not assigned it. Thank you.
Waiting in the wings is Sri Tenkate. She's originally from Medan in North Sumatra, Indonesia. What would it be like to come to a foreign country to pursue your higher education? Sri will tell us about her remarkable odyssey from Indonesia to Hawaii, back to Indonesia, and back again to Hawaii. Welcome, Sri.
Thank you, Ben. Remembering my time at the University of Hawaiʻi at Mānoa is reminiscing on the good old days when digital technology, virtual learning, and video conferencing were unheard of. It was a time when smartphones and e-books were not in existence. It was a time when the library card catalog was our search engine. It was a time when using the dial phone, writing letters, and simply talking to each other were the systems of social networking. When I first meet people for the first time, they often ask me, "How do you say your name?" I get it. In the English language, there is no word that starts with the letters S and R. Then the next question is often going like so. So where are you from? So this is how my story begins. I was born and raised in the city of Medan, located in the northern part of Sumatra, which is one of the 5 largest islands in the Indonesian archipelago. Growing up, we spoke the Javanese language and also the Bahasa Indonesia, which is the Indonesian language at school. I am the first child in a family of 8 children. My oldest brother and I attended an American school from kindergarten until our senior years. After high school, I started my career working as a protocol secretary at the American consulate and also as an English language teacher. After college, I went to college to earn my undergraduate and graduate degrees in English. So after graduation, I worked at the American consulate as a protocol secretary. So it was there that I heard about the East-West Center and learned about this scholarship application. Not wanting to miss on this rare opportunity, I submitted my application and took the required test of English as a foreign language, which is also known as the TOEFL test. I passed the test, which led me to receive the scholarship from the East-West Center to study at the University of Hawaiʻi at Mānoa. Actually, my trip started when my life took a dramatic turn when I embarked on a 7,000-mile journey to the other side of the world on the Pan American Airways. My father actually accompanied me to Singapore on my way to Hawaii. I was understandably overwhelmed with excitement, but soon this moment of wonder and anticipation came to an abrupt halt. Just a few days after my arrival at the East-West Center, I received news from home that my father had passed away. I was deeply saddened by the news, as I was not able to be with my family. It took me quite a while to cope with the loss and adjust to that major life change. At the East-West Center, I stayed at the Haleʻi dormitory, where I stayed during the time I was at the University of Hawaiʻi to pursue a graduate degree in the English as a second language program. Haleʻi was a home away from home. This is where students from Asia, from many parts of Asia, the Pacific, and the United States live together in harmony while studying, building relationships, and understanding different cultures. I also had the privilege of meeting students from diverse backgrounds in the classes I attended at Moore Hall. Life on campus included frequent visits to Hamilton Library. My Smith Corona typewriter was an indispensable possession for typing reports and assignments. When we were not, my experience at East-West Center was enriched by my summer study tour, during which time we visited several campus colleges in several states, including Michigan, Washington, New York, New Mexico, and Washington, D.C. When we were not sharing our culinary skills in the community kitchen in the dorm, our favorite place to eat was the Saga Cafeteria, which was located in the basement of Jefferson Hall, which is the main East-West Center building. We would look out while enjoying the lush landscape accentuated by the beautiful and serene Japanese garden. Once a week, we would walk to Star Market, which is now Long's Drugs, to do our grocery shopping. On our free time, we would go to the Kennedy Theater to attend concerts or see plays. One evening, a good friend of mine and I went to see a play at the Kennedy Theater. After the show, we crossed the street to UH Mānoa to call a taxi to go to her house. He happened to be there. At this time, it was sheer coincidence that I met the man who would become my husband. He happened to be there at UH Mānoa. My friend knew him. We were introduced, and he offered us a ride in his International Scout. And so we kept in touch, and so began our relationship. After I graduated from University of Hawaiʻi with my graduate degree in the English as a second language, I returned home to Indonesia and resumed my teaching job as an English language teacher. Our unexpected encounter prompted him to come to my hometown the following year, where we got married. His Dutch upbringing was unlike mine, especially in my family's traditional setting. The interracial marriage at the time was not the norm, especially in my family's traditional setting. So after a few months has passed, I could join him in Honolulu. During that time, he was starting his plant nursery business on the island of Molokai. Meanwhile, I stayed in Honolulu, waiting for the birth of our son. He was just 2 months old when he flew with us on the 9-seat propeller plane for the big move to the island of Molokai. Flying with a baby to that island for the first time was another significant point in my life. Nothing could ever be the same again, and there was no turning back. I was a stay-at-home mom for a while, and I began working again when our son started kindergarten. After a year of work at the Molokai High School Library, I decided to return to University of Hawaiʻi to pursue a graduate degree in library science after I worked the whole year at the Molokai High School Library. That's the reason I wanted to go back to the UH. So then, the time that I returned to Hawaii, the University of Hawaii, was another important, significant time in my life as well, because being a student again was quite challenging this time. Since my family moved on to Molokai, I had to commute weekly from Oahu to Molokai. The trips included bus rides from the UH campus to the inter-island terminal on Lagoon Drive and flights on Air Molokai. After I graduated from the library school, I returned home to Molokai and became the librarian at Molokai Public Library, the only public library on the island and also one of the 51 libraries in the Hawaii State Public Library system. We lived on Molokai until my retirement. My interest in the Hawaiian language remains unchanged because when I was still working at the Molokai Library, I felt the need to learn the language. So I continue my lifelong learning to improve my ability to speak it and understand it as well. My life would be entirely different had I not come to the East-West Center and studied at the University of Hawaiʻi. I would not have been able to meet, learn from, and live alongside people from multicultural and linguistic backgrounds, to travel to unfamiliar places, and to achieve my educational, professional, and personal goals. For these reasons, I'm eternally grateful to the East-West Center and to the University of Hawaii at Manoa for such a memorable and life-changing experience. Thank you.
Our last speaker this evening is Emma McGuire. She was born and raised on Oahu and attended Punahou School. Then she received her bachelor and master's degrees here at Manoa. Presently, she's a teacher at Punahou, where she's taught for 18 years. She currently teaches Kapapa Ike Hawaii in the 2nd and 3rd grades, and she's the proud mother of 2 boys. Aloha, Emma.
Aloha mai kākou, o Emma McGuire ko'u inoa, o Alan McGuire ko'u makua kane, o Vicky Hollinger ko'u makua hine, no Mauna Lua o Ahu Maiau. Mahalo nui loa for having me here today to share some of my stories about my time here at Ke Kula Nui o Hawaiʻi ma Manoa. I was raised in Mauna Lua, otherwise known as Hawaii Kai, and actually growing up we didn't even know the word Mauna Lua, we just called it Hawaii Kai. And my hale, my home, was half a mile inland from the bay and half a mile seaward of Hahaione Valley. We lived in a humble home with a large backyard right on the marina, and it was our playground constantly. I was raised with 4 older siblings. My sister Mamo attended Kamehameha. My sister Kehao attended Kaiser. My brother Jimmer also attended Kaiser, and my brother Kavika attended Kamehameha. I attended Punahou School from K through 12th grade.
In our backyard, we loved playing by the marina. We used to look all the time for jellyfish, the occasional stingray, and we constantly tried to catch all the crabs that we could find. But our favorite time of the year was during Christmas when we'd have the annual boat parade, and we loved catching the candy. They would throw candy to us from the boats. And so that was our favorite part of the year, except they don't do that anymore because you can't put plastic in the water. But back then, I think anything kind of went. We lived on what we thought was called the marina, but little did we know it was actually one of the largest, if not the largest, fish pond in ancient Hawaii, a very sacred place that sustained a huge population. While I felt deeply connected to the place that I called home, I was very disconnected from Aina and the history of that place. I was primarily raised by my makuahine, my mother. She was a single mom of 5. And going to Punahou, I, along with most of my classmates, had our eyes set on going to a university on the continent someplace. I have no idea why, but I wanted to go to California, to Napa Valley, to go to school there in wine country. I didn't even drink wine, so I don't know why I wanted to go there, but it sounded romantic and fun. But as I got closer to graduation, I decided, I've spent a lot of my mom's money coming to Punahou school, so maybe I'll just save her some money, go to UH or maybe KCC, and take my prerequisites. So once I made my decision, I went home and I told my mom, I said, Mom, I'm gonna go to UH for a couple of years. And she was so happy, not because she wasn't willing to pay for my education on the continent someplace, but because she said, quote, Emalani, you can finally take your olelo. And I looked at her and I said, I don't want to take Olelo Hawaii. I really want nothing to do with Hawaiian language. And I think it kind of shocked her. But to me, I really felt nothing at the time. That's just an example of how disconnected I was to my culture. In the fall of 1993, I started here at University of Hawaiʻi at Mānoa. And I had room in my schedule, and so I decided, I'm just going to take a Hawaiian language class. One, it can fulfill, my credit, and 2, I can just pacify my mother. And so I started a class with Kumu Naomi Loesch. She was my first kumu. And I remember sitting in this class, and it was a really weird experience for me in a good way. It was the first time that I felt like the values that I lived at home with my mom and my siblings, it was replicated in this classroom setting. And I finally realized that I was missing something that I never realized I was missing. So being in Hawaiian language was the first time I actually felt proud to be Hawaiian. During those days, there were actually budget cuts, though, and I remember we had a hard time getting into sections, and we would gather out on Bachman Lawn with other teachers and students, and we would hold signs, and we'd walk around in circles, and I remember chanting over and over again with hundreds of people, Olelo, Hawaii, Olelo, Hawaii now, and it would just get louder and louder. And I remember that we all went into Bachman Hall, and some of our kumu even went through the barricade and up the stairs, and just demanded that we had sections available for us to learn Hawaiian in Hawaii. Thankfully and rightfully so, the university provided funding and more sections, and from that point on, none of us ever had trouble getting a class in Hawaiian language. So at that point, I realized, what? Hawaiian is pulling me at my na'au to stay here, so UH is going to fulfill more than just my prerequisites. I knew I was here for the long haul. A funny memory that I have was one of my brother and myself catching the bus to school. So we opted out of living in the dorms because why live in the dorms when you can live at home with your mom? There's free food, she does your laundry, it's just so much easier. And we were very fortunate that the bus stop was right across from our house. So every day we would march across the street and catch the 80A University Express bus. Now, it was a direct bus, it bypassed all the stops, and so a lot of the same people caught the bus every day. So we recognized everyone on the bus, they recognized us, but we didn't know their names. So one day we got on the bus, showed our bus passes, sat down in the front left seats, the bus started to pull away, and all of a sudden it came to a jerking stop, and we were like, what's going on? So out the window, I glanced across the street and I see my mother running across the street in her nightgown, no slippers on her feet, with 2 bags. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, what is happening right now? She proceeds to knock on the door of the bus. The bus driver opens the door and she walks up the stairs. And she looks at the bus driver with these 2 bags, and she said, "My babies forgot their lunch." And my jaw dropped. She walked over, passed us our food, probably kissed us on the cheek, and then got off the bus and walked home. And I remember that our fellow riders were very gracious. There were no giggles, but there were a lot of smiles on their faces. You have to love mothers. We will always be their babies. Later in 1996, I met with a counselor for the College of Ed because I decided to go into education. And I decided I was going to join the Kalama o ke Kaiaulu cohort out on the Leeward Coast. So I rushed home to tell my mom. I said, "Mom, I'm going to join the Leeward Coast cohort. It's a perfect plan." Because I lived in Mauna Loa, Hawaii. I told her, I can just get up in the morning, drive around Makapu'u, look at the sunrise, attend school. And she looked at me and she said, "Emalani." And you know when the Lani gets added to the name, you're doing something wrong. So she said, "Emalani, do you know where the Leeward Coast is?" I said, "Of course I know where that is. It's Waimanalo." She goes, "It is not Waimanalo, it is Waianae." And I was like, oh, dear God, what have I gotten myself into? So for 2 years, I had to drive every day from Mauna Loa across the island to Waianae. I put on many miles on my car. I taught many days in the hot Waianae sun. But what that 21-year-old ditzy moment did for me was provide me with so many amazing memories with my phenomenal kumu and my fellow peers. I am blessed beyond words to have had my experience here at University of Hawaiʻi. It took a 17-year-old girl who was very disconnected from land, language, and culture, and it helped me to grow into a young woman who had a love for Aina, a love for Olelo, and a love for Namea Hawaiʻi. I've been teaching at Punahou School since 2001, Hawaiian language and Hawaiian culture, and in 2011 I came back to get my master's in Hawaiian language. I've loved every single moment here at the University of Hawaiʻi, and I want to send out a huge mahalo to all of my kumu. Mahalo nui loa, aloha.
At the top of the show, I mentioned some practical jokes that we played as grad students in the 80s, and I mentioned that I was given a master key to Kennedy Theater that opened every door, including the faculty members' offices. What an incredible power to give a 28-year-old. I had the key for 3 years. It was very tempting, and in my last semester, I gave way to temptation. We'd finished our comprehensive exams and our oral defenses, and now the great, wide, wild, scary world outside of Kennedy Theater was looming before us. Also looming was April 1st, April Fool's Day. So some friends and I decided we wanted to show our faculty how much we cared about them, how much we appreciated them, how much we respected them, and so we decided to prank them. Late at night, after rehearsals were done and the theater had emptied, this must have been 2 or 3 in the morning, my friends and I moved like fairies from office to office to office, using my magic key to let us in. And then we would rearrange the furniture and build sculptures with chairs on top of desks, lamps on top of chairs, other things, whatever we could find. And then we would decorate our creations with flowers and toilet paper. We stuffed waste baskets with flowers. We hung flowers from the ceilings. It was all very gentle and highly aesthetic. The most malicious thing we did was to the offices where we rearranged nothing. In those offices, the faculty member would come in and think, oh, I got off scot-free, until they decided to leave their office. And then they would reach for the door and zip, zip, zip. We'd grease the inside doorknob with Vaseline. Gah. I still believe we were showing our respect and affection for our teachers. We wanted them to know, however, that while we were hardworking and trustworthy, we were still students. And as such, we claimed the eternal right and privilege of all students, the right to make mischief. Thank you so much for watching us this evening. And now I'm going to send it right back to Bailey Matsuda and the Story Share Band.
A great big mahalo to our Story Share band. That's Bailey Matsuda on piano, Chris Ye on sax, and Alex Morrison on stand-up bass. I also want to say another thank you to our MC for this evening, Ben Moffitt. Fabulous job, Ben. And a special mahalo to all our tellers this evening, Dave Del Rocco, Michael Jones, Ike Kahaleahu, Emma McGuire, Neil Milner, Alex Morrison, Sri Tenkate, and out there, they also, many of them worked with our storytelling coach, Nyla Fuji-Ibab. Thanks to Nyla for helping them out this evening. Obviously, the work paid off. Fabulous stories, wonderful tells, and we've had nothing but positive comments from you, our audience, for everything that they shared this evening, and many of them were beautiful and heartwarming and funny. It's just a wonderful evening. If you would like to share a story, we're going to be doing this again on May 21st. Please email us at csinfo@hawaii.edu. That's CSINFO@hawaii.edu, and share your story about something happening here in Hawaii. We'd love to hear from you. We also want to thank our sponsors again, the National Endowment for the Arts, the Hawaii State Foundation on Culture and the Arts, the University of Hawaii, the East-West Center Arts Program, the university's music program, the Kainoa Senior Services, Friends of Manoa Library, and you, our audiences, for helping us to make this happen. I also want to thank my co-producers, Jonathan Korth from the music department and Eric Chang from the East-West Center Arts Program, and our wonderful production crew that turned Orvis Auditorium into a regular television studio in the course of a couple of hours every time we do this. That's M. Richard, Todd Bodden, Anandev Banerjee, Nicholas Shaldron, Margaret Arakaki. And I especially want to one more time thank you, our audience. We'll be back with a special program next week, Tuesday, featuring the University of Hawaiʻi Mānoa Jazz Ensemble. And in 2 Fridays from today, here on this stage again, we'll have Gypsy 808 for you. So thank you all very much. Thank everyone who participated. Thank you, our audience. Everybody, stay safe and aloha.